don't limit yourself in terms of the capabilities, both like from a human perspective and these systems can bring, right? For me, thinking about what's possible, right, and looking at the future, what is going to be possible with this system, I think that's going to be huge.
Wow, Christina, what a great conversation with Muhammad Farooq.
I love Muhammad. I think he's fantastic. He has such a great story, right? Like, he has over 200,000 subscribers on YouTube, and he got them in a relatively short period of time. But what I think is so impressive is that when he started his channel, which was just kind of because his friends were like, we want to know more about how these systems work. And they were like, well, you should share this with everyone. You know, it blows up because he happened to be, you know, right at the perfect moment when everyone was starting to care about LLMs. And he has the capability of being able to, you know, really inform people how they work and teach people stuff. It's incredibly cool.
Yeah. His story about building localGPT, which is his first very successful open source project on GitHub. It's so interesting to talk to him about how he started building it 2 years ago and how he was so hands-on and really building it piece by piece. And he is now launching localGPT 2.0 and built it in a completely different way.
This whole season is about builders, and I think that Muhammad is like the consummate builder, right? Because he's a creator, he's a builder, and he's doing the things, and we can all see what he's doing, both as he's documenting his journey on YouTube, as he's walking through this is, you know, how these systems work, and also just looking through the code itself, right? Because he's made it open source.
Definitely, you said it. He is the consummate developer. So let's go meet him.
This podcast is sponsored by Google. Any remarks made by the speakers are their own and are not endorsed by Google.
We're so excited to have you, Muhammad. Welcome to the studio and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you.
Like with all of our guests, we're going to start by reading your bio. So Muhammad Farooq is a Ph.D. trained machine learning engineer who specializes in information retrieval and retrieval augmented generation systems, or RAG for short. Through his consulting practice, he has helped organizations deploy scalable AI solutions that harness large language models and autonomous agents. An open source champion, he created and maintains localGPT, a widely used RAG framework with more than 21,000 stars on GitHub. He also shares hands-on tutorials and industry insights with more than 200,000 subscribers on his Prompt Engineering YouTube channel, where he combines deep technical expertise with a passion for making cutting-edge research accessible and useful to builders everywhere. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome, Muhammad. We're so glad to have you here.
Thanks for having me. It's my pleasure.
So we want to kind of get into your story a little bit and how, you got into, as Ashley mentioned in your bio, you have your PhD trained, but I think we became aware of you because of your YouTube channel, which, as Ashley mentioned, you have over 200,000 subscribers. So just kind of getting into this, I guess, how did you first kind of get into tech, and then what led you into starting up your YouTube channel?
As you said, I have a PhD, so that was kind of a more academic path, right? I did a lot of research on sensors and machine learning systems, right? Specifically focused on biomedical engineering. I always had interest in natural language processing, because that's a very interesting idea of processing natural language, right, and make it machine readable or understandable. For most of my career, I have been working in the smart sensors domain, which is not kind of related to NLP, but towards the end of 2022, when ChatGPT was released, right, this was the first time that I started interacting with chatbots. And so I have a lot of friends who work in the tech industry, but are not like in the machine learning field. They started asking me questions, and I would create these cool demos, right, using like these external APIs, and start sharing with them, right? And one of the way I found was useful was to just create videos and start sharing those videos with them, right? And then like somebody suggested, why don't you just make it public and start a YouTube channel? So initially I started that just for sharing with my friends, but turned out there was a lot of interest in it, and people started watching it. And I've been doing it for the last couple of years now.
What was the video that you first launched where you were like, oh, I've made it?
Oh, okay. So for me, it was a little different than, I guess, like most content creators. I released this video on creating AI avatars, right? So this was like very early days of animating a, an image using audio scripts, right? And that went, I think I released it in the first or second week. It was just like showing how to put these things together, right? And it went viral. So within the first week, I think it had over 1 million views.
Wow.
So at that point, I was like, oh, okay, this is probably something serious, right? Because people are watching it, right? And I started creating more and more content, but I think I have found a more niche of technical content, right? So I still do it as a part-time, right? It's not a full-time thing. But I feel like my audience are now more interested in technical content.
Very cool. So yeah, I mean that's so interesting. It's always so interesting to hear from people like what like kind of their first breakthrough video was. You started your channel to connect with friends and because they had questions about emerging tech, and then they encouraged you to share it with others. Do you know how your videos were discovered so broadly? Like, did you share them on other networks? Was it just kind of like the algorithm gods looking upon you? Like what do you think it was that kind of got you maybe surface for a lot of folks?
Yeah, so I mainly shared it on YouTube, and I didn't do any like cross-platform posting, right? I actually got my like X account probably a few months ago, right? So it wasn't really active on anything else, but seems like there was a lot of interest in the topics that I was covering, right? So I think that helped me a lot, and at that time when I started my YouTube channel, I think there were probably hardly any content creators who were covering technical aspects, right? So now, like with
Gotcha.
AI trends, there are a lot, but at that point, I think the timing was right. Apart from the topic that I was covering.
How would you say right now? You say you're a part-time creator. But you have this big channel. How would you say that the types of content that you cover on your channel now? How does that align with the work that you do as a consultant or otherwise? Is there like a lot of crossover there, or are you still kind of seeing them as separate things that you're doing?
So for me specifically, I focus, as I said, on the technical contents, right? So I would divide it into two parts, right? One is like the latest model and news part, right? Which drives in a lot of interest from people who are just interested in learning about models or new capabilities. But the second focused area for me is my open source work. So that's like building rack systems, right? And then content around it. And that has been a really good source of getting to know people in industry and through those getting some consulting as well, right? So like I have tried my best to gear it towards more technical stuff that is used in industry. And that has been extremely helpful in getting to know people.
The bulk of your work seems to be around retrieval augmented generation systems, RAG, as you say.
Mm-hmm.
Can you maybe, for a layman's person, explain a little bit of what that is and also why this is so important in the space of AI and machine learning specifically?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So if you look at the LLMs in general, right, like Gemini or any of the models out there, right, they are trained on a finite amount of data, right? And when you train them, you kind of freeze them in time, right? Now, in most of the cases, what happens is it's going to be trained on publicly available data, but for enterprises or businesses, usually the data is not exposed, right? So it's private data, right? So how do you leverage these LLMs, which are essentially chatbots that you can talk to, interact with, right? So retrieval augmented generation is a technique that you can bring in your private data and expose it to these systems, right? So rather than them being fixed in terms of the training time or checkpoint, now you're bringing in fresh data, right? So that's like one way of doing it, right? And I feel like it has a lot of applications in industry, right? Because it enables you to interact with your ever-changing data.
And at the same time, you can still use what those larger language models have been trained on and what they're good at, but give them the additional context of things from your private information, right?
Exactly,
well,
right. Exactly, right. So because when we train these models, these are extremely capable models, right? It's just the freshness of data and I would say like your business context. That is the most critical part, right? So the models have capabilities that you're leveraging on your own data, right? And that's why it makes it very powerful, right? So it's not just the model, the data itself, but leveraging the model capability with your data.
Yep. I can
Very
see
cool.
how that would be really useful to have. And are you, in your consulting business, is this something that you're getting a lot of questions about? Do you find your time mostly consulting around implementing RAG systems, or does it range in other areas as well?
Yeah, so it's like a flavors of retrieval, right? So like the way I look at it, RAG is a search mechanism, right? So there are components of agentic systems where you build autonomous systems, but essentially in most cases you're doing search, right? And search in itself, I think it's a very important problem, like in enterprise, right? So most of my consulting is how to build better search engines for your data, and then leverage that search results to do subsequent tasks, right? So it could be like report generation, right? Or automation. So you leverage RAG as a basis, but then you empower agents with it, right? So that's how I help businesses.
So let's talk a little bit about localGPT, which is one of your open source projects. It has almost 21,000 stars on GitHub, and I think if I remember correctly, this was one of the earliest local kind of tools that was available, because I worked at GitHub at the time, and I remember watching to see what projects would get a lot of stars. And I remember this one being one of the early implementations for people who, for whatever reason, wanted to be able to run the RAG systems locally using local models. Can you tell us a little bit about what the impetus was behind localGPT and how you built it to begin with?
Yeah. So the reason behind or the philosophy behind localGPT was to leverage local models, right? So even if you look at today, a lot of enterprises are not ready to share their data with proprietary APIs, right? That's a big concern, right? So the idea behind localGPT was like, okay, the models are getting better. We have better retrieval system. What if you enable businesses to use these local models, which they can run in airtight or air gap infrastructure, right? And bring in the same capabilities that a proprietary models can bring, right? So that's how I built the initial version. And the goal was everything is supposed to be local and private, so you can trust, right? And it got a lot of traction on GitHub because there were a couple of other projects, but at that time, localGPT, like one thing which I was focused on was to make sure it uses GPUs and hardware that actually makes it useful, right? So that was kind of the start of localGPT.
And then you documented the process of building it on your YouTube channel as well, right?
Yes. Yeah. So when I was building localGPT, I was creating content around it, right? So everything that I was doing, all the learnings are well documented, right? So I think that was another reason as well. Probably like a lot of developers were interested in it because there were a couple of iterations, right? And I was interacting with people, figuring out what worked, what didn't work, right? So it was like overall a community approach, right? Which made it better in every iteration, and that YouTube content creation, I think, played a part in making sure that people are aware of the capabilities and the project itself, right?
It's like you're showing people how to make the sauce while you're making the sauce and experimenting with it.
Exactly, yeah, and learning from people's experiences as well, right?
Right.
Incorporating those, yeah.
Yeah.
Did it surprise you how quickly localGPT took off? Was that a surprise to you?
Yes, yeah. It started as a weekend project, right? I saw a project and I was like, okay, here are the things that I can improve, right? And I started building it, and I posted it, and actually, so it was trending as #1 project for a few days, and I didn't realize it. Somebody actually sent me a link that, it's trending on GitHub. I was like, oh, okay, good, awesome. Yeah, because I was, as I said, I was mostly focused on the YouTube, right? So I was probably looking at the views on the video that I created, right? But then it was trending on GitHub, and I think it got noticed on Twitter as well.
I was just thinking, because you've built local GPT 2 years ago. The landscape has changed enormously since. I was wondering if you could give us a little bit of a preview or a summary of what it was like to build it then. It sounds like it was a very collaborative, piece-by-piece effort. If you were to build it today, I'm sure things would be very different. How so?
Yeah, so I'm releasing what I'm calling localGPT 2.0, right? So
Congratulations!
Thank you. It's very different than the initial version, right? But coming back to your question, like at that time, so we were talking about before any of these coding assistants, right? Even though it's like just 2 years, but I think a lot has changed since then.
So much has changed.
Yeah, so like I had to do all of my research, right? I had to write all my code and then test it and to make sure everything works, right? And then like with these local models, you need to make sure there is cross-platform support.
Right.
So for every operating system, right? And initially, like most of the bugs or issues were like, oh, it doesn't work on Windows or it doesn't work on Linux or my GPU, right? So it was, I think, a lot of back and forth. Now with the second iteration, I have worked more as a technical manager, right? And I came up with design specs of how exactly I want things to be, right? And then used a combination of different tools like Gemini, Cursor, right? And it's like not just like one tool, right? But a combination of different tools to do my research and then code implementation, testing. So this has been, I think, a lot bigger effort compared to what I did in the first iteration, but it has been much more quicker. And I hope like the project itself or this iteration is going to be much better as well in terms of capabilities.
No, that's really interesting. I mean, can you talk a little bit more about, I guess, kind of like what has changed? Obviously, agentic workflows have come out in the last couple of years, but there've also been, new GPUs, new chipset drivers. Macs went from, not having kind of a great way of kind of dealing with GPU things that used to be for local stuff anyway. We would only have to deal with like NVIDIA, drivers and that would basically be it. Into having, MLX and better stacks there, some of the AMD stuff has gotten better too. Has that made it easier for you in building this second version? Like, are you able to maybe offload those tasks in kind of your way you're treating this kind of as a management task, or are you still having to deal with some of those implementation issues too?
Yeah, no, I think that like these tools have matured enough. So like when I started localGPT, the only way to run a local model was Llama CPP, right?
Right.
And even like within Llama CPP, the support for models was very limited based on their architecture, right? So and at that time, I think GGUF format was just getting started. There was AWQ format, right? So these are different quantization methods that people use, right? So supporting all of this was really hard because it's like the way I look at it, an airplane is flying, right? And we are building it together at the same point, right? So it's really hard. Things break, right? Now I think these tools have matured a lot, right? So like, okay, people use Ollama, VLLM, right? Those are normally local deployment with Llama CPP, and then MLX, right? JAX, I think, is also adding support for a lot of different models, right? So overall, I think it has matured a lot, which makes development a lot easy, right? And second thing is like even the coding models, right? So or the assistive coding tools, the way I want to call them, right? They have also matured a lot, right? So like when the first iteration came, going back to the training of the LLMs, right? They were kind of limited in or frozen in time, so they didn't really have the ability to look at these new updated packages, right? And things change, right? But now most of these agentic tools have the capability to do web search, right? So look up the documentation or maybe like MCP supports, right? So that has, I think, improved the workflow and even the development time for me. Right. So I've been leveraging all of these different tools and they've been really great.
You talk about this concept of being a technical manager. Can you say more about that? I mean, you have described how you're sort of managing these different workflows together, which has been a big change. 2 years ago, you were in the weeds, coding, doing the hands-on work. And now it's almost like you're outsourcing different pieces to various like LLMs or Gemini or Cursor, and you're wearing sort of a different hat. So I'm curious to learn more about this shift and also where you see kind of your role evolving.
Yeah, so with the coding agent or tools, right, it's very easy to build software now, right? The problem that I'm seeing is a lot of people are coming in without technical background, right? So you start building on technologies that you don't know, right? And the LLMs
Right.
or these agentic tools are going to build software the way they want, right? So let's say if I ask Gemini, here's a project I want, right? Can you suggest a tech stack, right? So it will suggest a tech stack and then build on top of that, right? Now that tech stack may or may not be like well optimized for the task that I want, right? So this is where I think the technical expertise comes into play, right? And you want to be very precise on how you instruct these systems, right? Because they are going to go and add a lot of features that you don't want, right? So in my role, the way I see when I'm building software is I come up with a spec sheet, like, okay, here are the specs that I want, right? Here is the list of features that I want, right? And then break it down. And then you can really use these coding agents if you make them very focused, right? So for the focused tasks in iteratively building with these tools, right? So I think that's going to be how the future workflow is going to look like for software developers, right? You need to have still like deep technical expertise to effectively use these systems, but it's going to be more on managing these tools effectively rather than writing your code.
Thanks for sharing your secret sauce.
And have you found, like with the second version of localGPT, where you've been able to kind of give it these requirements and stacks, have you been able to implement features that maybe you would have shied away from implementing before, because you had the awareness of what you want to do, but maybe it would have been too time consuming or otherwise? Like, has there been anything, I guess, have you been able to do things that maybe users have requested that you might not otherwise have committed the time to? Has anything with that changed?
Oh yeah. So like I consider myself as an ML researcher, right? Or maybe a backend developer at most, right? So I never had the background to build front ends. Right? So that's been
Right.
like one of the things. Like even the initial version that I created was a simple Streamlit app, right? So it's functional, but not really pretty, right? Right.
Sure.
But with this new version, since these tools can actually build front ends and really nice ones, right? I was
They
able to
can,
actually
yeah.
implement those, right? And it's like, all right, here's the especially like with the multimodal ones, right? It's amazing because you give it a template. This is what I want, right? And then you iteratively build with those, right? So it's been amazing. Like some of the things that's just like one example, right? Of something that even today I can't do it, but with these agentic coding tools, we're able to build new capabilities, right? And that's just, as I said, one example. There have been a lot of other things, like the amount of documentation, for example, I'm able to read through the system is just amazing.
Yeah, and it makes testing easier too, right? I mean, because you were mentioned before, like when you're building the first version, you're having to write all those unit tests yourself. There were some, AI coding systems, but not to the extent they are now. And so, I'm sure that you can have wider test coverage too now, when you're building stuff out, which is also going to make for a better result.
Yeah, definitely. That's like, and especially like, I think it's a normal problem with developers, right? When you're developing, you don't really have enough time left to even test, like have full coverage, right? But with these
Right.
tools, definitely it's a great value addition, and it's been really great in that sense as well.
Can we go back to, you said you're now able to read more documentation than ever before? Is that what you said?
Yes.
Say more about that. What do you mean?
Okay, so normally, let's say if I'm working on developing or integrating a certain API, right? I'll go and look up the documentation for that, right? But the problem is you'll probably find an older version of the documentation, right, which is not even relevant anymore, right? So you have to
Right.
sniff through all of those things, right? But now with these agentic tools, right, you could do a wider search, right? If you use them properly, they will really narrow down the search area, right? And can actually figure out or show you more relevant documentation. Like even especially something like deep research, right? It's been extremely valuable, right? Because that can find things that you will miss when you're doing like a human search.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Was there something in when you were using, like these agentic coding tools that really you're like, wow, I really see the power of these agents and I'm really going to lean into it and leverage it?
Yeah. So one example would be like going back to the prior conversation, integration with these different packages, right? So going back to the LLMs, like if you want to support Mac OS, right, and then it's like there are Apple Silicon versus like the older Intel, right, and then a whole bunch of different GPUs from NVIDIA, right, or TPUs, right. So for me, it would be like an impossible task to do it in a managed time, right? But with leveraging these tools, you can easily build that, right? So that's been pretty awesome, right? And a big unlock. Like especially for me, right? And then like certain times you run into bugs, in some of these search tools will be able to find sources which you probably won't even notice, right?
So, like, obviously, there are people in the community have contributed to the project too, but this has primarily been like a solo project of yours. How much would you say, like, and I don't know what your open source experience was like before localGPT. Had you managed or maintained any open source projects before localGPT?
No, this was the first one.
Okay, so I mean, again, I'm somebody who's like comes kind of from the open source world, and that can be a lot to undertake. This was one of the reasons why I asked if you would expected it to be as successful as it was, because on the one hand that can be really exciting, and on the other hand that can be overwhelming when you have that many pull requests or issues and that many people using your stuff, and then now you're like, oh, do I have to support this? How do I maybe integrate these things into it, especially if you're doing this as like a weekend project and like as a solo developer. I don't know if you could maybe talk a little bit about what I guess is it, the last, 2 years and even the last, year or so, or even 6 months has changed, or has anything changed that has made it easier for you to manage a large project like that as an individual developer?
Yeah. So it's definitely been a struggle, to be honest, right? Like, as I said, it was my first endeavor into open source project. Didn't expect like the success it had, and then it comes with all of these issues and pull requests, things like that, right? So initially, like the first version was very hectic because like I work full time, content creation, right? So it was much harder. But now for the second version, even like during development times, I have been leveraging some of the AI tools, right? So there are automatic code reviews, right? I've been using a combination of different tools from different companies, right? So I hope, I don't know yet, right? When the second version is released, I hope it's going to be a lot smoother journey, right? But one thing I want to point out is like I leverage these AI agentic tools a lot, but you need to be very careful of how you use them, right?
Well, let's talk more about that actually, because I mean I think that's a really important thing for people to know about. What are the things that you need to look out for when you're using these tools and you're building these systems?
One of the normal thing that we have seen specifically with vibe coding, right? People build software, right? And it's great for demos, right? So you can, within a weekend, you will be able to build something really cool without even any coding background, right? Which is awesome, right? And it's enabling new people to take on development, right? However, if you start building more scalable solutions that you're going to support, let's say thousands of or hundreds of thousands of people, right? Then you start seeing holes in the implementations, right? So like a simple example I would give it is when you start building features with these agentic coding systems, right? They were going to start forgetting about it, right? So let's say I build a feature, right? I build three more features on top of it, right? Now I want to reuse that feature, and all of a sudden you are going to see that the agent starts re-implementing that feature again, right? Because it forgot about the prior implementation, right?
No.
Yeah, right. Or a second issue that I'm currently running into is this, right? So let's say it wrote a function, and that function is being used or called in 10 different places, right? Now, you want to add some more functionality. We change the input outputs of that function, right? What ends up happening is, because of the limited context, it's going to update the input outputs, and let's say 5 of those function calls, right? It will forget about the 2 other ones, right? And now it's like, all right, everything works, right? So because you test it, you run the initial tests, and it might be just using those 2 function calls. But when you start putting this into production, right, you're going to see those cases where it starts failing, right? So that's why it's very important to understand your code base, right, and review every change that it makes, right? Because you're going to miss out on those edge cases, right? So those are just a couple of concrete examples that comes to mind.
When you're talking with either with some of your consulting clients or people who watch your YouTube channel who might be junior developers and might be comfortable with the AI tools but maybe don't have as deep of a background, what advice can you give to them, I guess, to maybe use these things effectively and not run into some of these pratfalls?
Yeah, so the way I'd see it is these are great learning tools as well, right? So when you're building them with these, like, the good way of learning is ask it why did it chose one implementation with against the other, right? So that gives you like a really good idea of kind of peeking into the mind or thought process of these systems, right? And then leverage that for your own learning, right? To build better systems, right? But I still feel like the traditional system design concepts are very important, right? So you still want to have that basic understanding, right? Like
What are those? What are those concepts?
So you want to see, or you want to make sure that you're putting these system together to be scalable, right? And how different APIs are going to interact with each other, right? You don't have to like know the coding aspect of it, right? But you want to make sure that you understand how to put these systems together. Right, so that's I think a most important thing that needs to happen. And just to like add to it, there is another trend that I'm seeing, which is I think really unfortunate. Most of these systems are data driven, right? So whether you are building a RAG system or any agentic system, right? The trend that I'm seeing is people do not want to spend time looking at their data, right? Yeah, right. And they expect magic from these systems, right? Which is like it's not a sexy job or a thing to actually spend time on looking and understanding your data, right? But it's something that needs to be done, right? And if you don't do that later on, you're going to run into issues.
Yeah, it's super important. I mean, we talk a lot about in sort of AI principles. I mean, the quality of your product starts with the value of your data and whether it's properly cleaned, it's been, organized, it's being rid of biases. Data seems to be the biggest place to start building a product that's going to be really good to all of its users.
Yeah, totally. And especially like in enterprise or real world, data is very messy, right?
Yes.
So you need to make sure that you properly pre-process it, and even like in some cases you want to have like post-processing, right, or safeguards, right? But that's a trend that unfortunately I think especially like the new developers are not paying too much focus to.
Yeah.
Right? Which is critical, right?
How are you addressing that? There, as you said, it's not a sexy job to go look through your data. So what incentive do you give them that sort of switches that light bulb and they think, oh, this is really crucial. I need to do that.
Yeah. So the way I look at it is if you start looking at your data, you're going to actually reduce your development time, right? So a simple example is like, again, going back to RAG systems, right? So people, when they build RAG systems, so you need to worry about how do you chunk your data, what is going to be the chunk size, what type of embeddings to use, and so on and so forth, right? And what I have seen in industry is people are going to try 10 different chunking methods, right? And see, okay, which one performs better, right? But a better approach is just look at the structure of your data, right? And based on the structure of the data, chunk it the way a human would look at it, right? So an example would be if you're looking at a research paper, usually you have an abstract, there is introduction, there are subsections, right? That is probably a really good way to chunk your data, right? And that will require understanding, looking at your data, right? And that will, like, essentially, if you start with your data understanding, the rest of the pipeline becomes a lot more easier, right? Rather than like praying to LLM gods that, okay, they're going to figure it out, right?
Right. That is going to do everything for you and is going to, not overwrite something or give you the wrong response. What are some of the differences that you're seeing, I guess, right now, especially when it comes to comfort with AI tools between maybe, more junior devs and more senior devs, or are you seeing any differences?
Yeah, so I think I see two extremes, right? One is junior developers look at these AI tools and they want to go all in, right? Because they can really generate code at a rate that was not possible before, right? When it comes to more established senior developers, a trend that I have seen is they probably tried a coding assistant or a coding tool 6 months ago, right? And based on their initial experience, they're like, okay, I'm not touching this at all, right? Because these are so bad, right? But now I feel like as a developer in general, you want to make sure to leverage these tools, irrespective of whatever your experience level is. Actually, before that, let me point out there was a very interesting paper that was released last week from a company called Meter, METR, right? So they looked at it's a very small sample size, so it's I think around 16 developers, if I'm not wrong, right? So they looked at 16 developers who are contributing to open source projects, and the study premises was how much speed up LLM coding assistance can bring, right? So the initially the estimate was we're going to get around 20 to 25% speed up in code development, right? At the end of the experiment, they found that with experienced developers, there was around 19 or 20% reduction in the amount of the quality code that will actually build, right? So it turned out that in that study, it's actually slowing people down rather than speeding them up, right?
Oh, I've been hearing about this. Yeah, sorry, keep going.
Yeah, but then I don't want to generalize it, right? So it's just a single study, very small subset, right? But I think we need more and more studies like that, right, to actually see the impact, right? And then another thing is we have yet to figure out what is the proper interface or UI UX for these coding tools. Right now, everybody's just focusing on chatbots, right? But that may not be the right interface, right? If you look at some of these LLMs, or actually like the LLMs in general, every one of the LLM or coding agent has its own personality, right? So you really need to adopt to that personality when you're using it, right? So I feel like we still have to figure out a lot about these systems, right? But in general, my recommendation is we need to adopt these or include these in our workflows.
What do you say to the junior developers, and what do you say to the senior developers? I mean, you've kind of given a bit of an overview, but if a junior developer is coming to you saying, "Yeah, this is everything. I want to do everything with this," what do you say? And then if a senior developer says, "No, I'm done. I'm not touching this," what is your way to sort of bring them in the middle and get them to see how to use these tools in a way that is a bit more balanced?
Yeah, so for junior developers, my recommendation would be do specs-driven development.
What does that mean?
You need to have very specific like specification of your product, right? So normally when we're doing a product development, we have PRD, right? That drives the product, right? So we probably want to have a very similar specs for software development as well, right? Especially when we're using these tools, right? And then at each step, you have to review. You can't blindly trust what the output is, right? I think another piece I would add is iterative development, right? So incremental feature development rather than giving these systems like, here's my wish list, right? Go and implement it,
Go
right?
execute.
Yeah.
So instead of trying to one-shot it, you're like, actually, let's multi-shot it. Let's do this step by step.
Exactly, right? Like that's how we as humans build, right? So
of course,
yeah,
yes.
and that should be how we interact with these systems as well, right? The current iteration, I think, is going to require a lot more hand-holding than just one-shotting everything, right? So that's for junior developers, right? For senior developers, I think we need to look at the capabilities of these systems, right? And then figure out like how they can be used. Like one example would be test coverage, right? That's something that can be easily done with these systems, right? And it actually saves a lot of time, right? So going back to my example of like being a technical manager, right? So for experienced developers, I think it's a lot more easier because they have a better understanding of leveraging these tools with their experience, right? So that would be the role that I would recommend.
For people who might not be able to keep up with everything that's going on, do you have any advice for how they can start to experiment with these systems?
So one way of doing it, or I guess like I started doing it, was I looked at some of my older projects that I have built, right, and try to rebuild them with these AI tools, right? So that will give you a really good idea of both the capabilities and limitations, right? And since you already know the code base, for example, right, so you have a very better sense of what goes wrong, right? So that's how I would approach it.
When you've done that with your other, with some of your older projects, have you either been like impressed with some of the solutions that have come up with that might have been different from what your implementation was, or has there ever been anything that's kind of surprised you where you've gone, oh, okay, I didn't consider doing something this way?
That's a good question. Like it definitely has improved the code writing speed. I don't think I have done this with reasoning models. Right? So reasoning models may come up with better solutions. Right? When I was testing initially, I was definitely impressed with the implementation. I don't know if I can say that for the code quality, right?
Sure.
Yeah, right. But like the reasoning models, some of the newer ones definitely can come up with solutions which are out of the box, right? Like I use some of these to brainstorm ideas. Right. Now, one thing which I don't like about LLMs, they are very agreeable, right?
Right.
So you're like, all right, here's the feature that I want to implement, right? Okay, and they'll be like, oh, this is the best thing in the world. Right?
Yes.
Okay, so you'll be like, all right, here's what I want to do it. Like, this is how I want to do it, right? They'll be like, yes, this is the perfect solution, right? And
this is an excellent idea.
Exactly.
Well
right?
done on you.
Yeah. So like that, from that perspective, I don't know, like if I can trust like the design choices, to be honest, at this point.
That's such an interesting thing to think about, that like they're too agreeable. That you kind of need it to be like the stereotypical, like, you know, grumpy coder, who's going to be pushing back, right? Like that more, you know, established senior dev who's like, no, this isn't right. As your code reviewer, that's really interesting to think about.
That would be a great product. I would use it.
Yeah, the subjective LLM.
Yeah.
Judgmental, right? I like that. Like, cause like I'm no, judgmental. I'm gonna judge your code, and roast it. I like that idea, actually. Someone please come up with that. So someone listening, please come up with a persona for these things to roast and judge and give like critical feedback on these things.
I wanted to shift. We hadn't kind of planned this, but I wanted to know a bit more about which of our Gemini models do you use How do you use them? What's been the most helpful part of them, and why did you choose them?
Yeah, I have been using Gemini more and more. Kind of going back to that ideation, right? I think the long context for the Gemini models, it's definitely really good, right? Like some of the other more model providers do offer long context right now, but Gemini, I think the Gemini team actually figured it out, right? I think it was one of the earliest ones.
Can you just explain for our listeners what the importance of the context is? And this goes along with some of or similar to some of the RAG things, but can you just explain a little bit why having more context is more useful?
Yeah, so like LLMs have this idea of how many tokens or how many words of information it can process, right? So every model that gets released has a certain amount of information that it can process in a single shot, right? So we call it like context window. Gemini, I think when 1.5 was released, and correct me if I'm wrong, like if I'm off, right? So they were offering 1 million context window, which was like industry, the biggest one in the industry, right? Most of them were,
I think it was almost 10x, or similar to what the other models at the time were doing.
Yeah, right. And especially like for coding tasks, right? If you're working with a large code bases, right? The context window plays a very critical role, right? If the model is just looking at part of the code, it's not going to have a global understanding of your code base, right? So you want a model that can look at larger portions of your code base, right? And for programming, I have found to be a lot more useful compared to some of the other offerings, right? And that's specifically talking about the long context. But I do want to point out the Flash and Flashlight models, right? So I'm a big proponent of you don't need the best or the biggest model for every application, right? You want to choose a model based on your needs, right? So the Flash models, they offer the same context window of 1 million token, but they are much faster, right? And if you use Gemini 2.5 Pro as a planner to plan, right? And then it's like, okay, here are the different features that you implement. Here's how you are going to implement, right? You don't need the Pro model anymore to actually implement those, right? You want a much faster model that can generate a lot faster code, right? So for those kind of cases, I've found Gemini Flash to be very helpful, very useful. So that's kind of like my personal use case.
To all those star beginner YouTubers out there, what advice do you have for them for starting their own channels?
Because it's obviously a much more crowded space now than it was when you were getting started. But would you have any advice that you want to give to someone who's wanting to start a more tech-focused, coding-focused YouTube channel today?
Okay, that's a hard one. Okay, because I don't know like whether I'm doing things right or not. But like my suggestion would be figure out a niche. Right. So in AI space, if somebody's just covering like news, right, it's not going to last long in the long run, right? So you want to figure out what actual value you are bringing in, right? And that's based on, like, let's say if somebody has technical expertise, being a technical creator, right? So that's, I think, the most important thing, that you want to differentiate yourself rather than like just hop on this hype train, right? And second thing is, based on my experience, content creation is a lot harder than it looks like, right? So like when I started a YouTube channel, it was just for myself, right? Like, okay, I didn't have any plan, and I was just posting videos, whatever I found interesting, right? Now, like, it has grown to a point at which you kind of start thinking about your audience as well, right? And you want to make sure that people who are spending time on your content, you provide them with valuable information, right? So it becomes a lot bigger responsibility as you grow, right? Because then you have to think about every video or every post that, okay, am I wasting somebody's time, or it's actually valuable, right? So when it starts growing, you need to consider that aspect as well, because I think for people that don't realize that, right? It's a huge commitment.
Is there anything that, knowing what you know now, that you would have done differently?
I would have focused a lot more on the technical things, right? like one thing which I have tried my best is not to hype up things, right? But I might have done some of the videos like along the line, right? But I think I have
Sure.
matured a lot now. But from the beginning, that's something that I would love to do it again. Like make it a lot more focused, make it more like I see myself as an educator rather than an influencer or entertainer, right? And that's like if I had to redo it, I would simply focus on educational content.
That's really interesting. And I think that kind of goes back to what you were saying before about like understanding your niche, understanding what differentiates you. And like for you, it's the fact that you do have this technical background. You are like somebody who, you have a PhD, you've studied this stuff, you've worked in these systems, you've consulted for a lot of companies. You are an influencer in the sense that, people look to you and take your advice, but you see yourself as you're wanting to educate, you're wanting to, show people from a technical level what needs to be done.
Yeah, and you're bringing developers along the journey of you exploring and experimenting with things. Sometimes I think when we watch these videos, it's like, here's how you do it, done, versus the journey that you're on and you're taking developers on is, here, let's build this together, and then you can see the ins and outs of how hard this is or how easy this is. And I think there's a lot of value in that storytelling in a way.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, like through the process, I have learned a lot from other people as well, right? That's another aspect. Like if you build audience, right, you're going to get feedback, right? And there are things probably you didn't cover in your video, right? People tried it, and like so it's a whole community effort, right? And one thing which I do want to say is content creation has helped me meet interesting people and network, right? So that has been like a huge value added, right? And if people start recognizing you, like that's the best thing that can happen for your career as well.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, I think it's time for some rapid fire questions. Christina.
Let's do it. All right, we're gonna get you started. What was the last thing that you automated for yourself, assuming that you did, like maybe that you let either AI do for you or wrote a script to do something for you?
So I do a lot of data scraping for some of the project. So I think that would be one, and test coverage. That's pretty much automated now.
Love it.
What was the last thing you asked a large language model?
Okay. So this morning I was testing different things, and one of the questions that I had was I asked the LLM or a number of different LLMs that pretend if you could write a letter to humanity, what you would say, right? And that was like, wow. I would actually recommend everybody to test this on different LLMs and see their responses.
What were some of the interesting responses or surprising responses that you saw?
So one of them was, I think, a lot more human, and it talked about how humans treat other humans. Right, so like whatever is happening in the world right now, like whatever we are doing to the environment, right? So it started that letter specifically pointing those things out, right? Which was very interesting, right? Because I wasn't expecting that, yeah. But I highly recommend to test that.
That's awesome. What can you do now that you couldn't do 6 months ago?
I couldn't do web development, web apps, front ends. I can do them now.
Amazing. Yeah, I'm kind of the opposite. Like I'm a front end person, and my back end is now a lot stronger than it was 6 months ago because of the agentic systems. So I love that.
What are the next sets of problems you're trying to solve?
Okay, so we are entering more agentic era where agents are able to take steps, right? So I'm actually thinking about how do you leverage those to not only aggregate information, but do things or automate things more effectively, right? So that's kind of the direction I'm moving in now.
And then finally, what is and this is kind of a big one, what's the biggest learning that you've had maybe in the last year about the future of work?
I would say, like, don't limit yourself in terms of the capabilities, both like from a human perspective and these systems can bring, right? That has been a huge unlock, right? Like for me, thinking about what's possible, right, and looking at the future, what is going to be possible with this system, I think that's going to be huge.
Couldn't think of a better way to end. What a great answer.
Really, really fantastic. And go ahead, and we will have a link to this in our show notes. But if people want to follow you on YouTube, you are youtube.com/engineerprompt.
Yes, at Engineer Prompt. That's my YouTube channel. I also have a Discord server where I interact with people, and you can also find me on X with the same engineer with double R's at the end, Prompt.
Great. And we'll have everything in the show notes.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. What a great conversation.
Thank you. I really enjoyed the conversation. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. For more information about our guests today, please check out the description.
And for more great conversations like this, hit that subscribe button. Until next time, thanks for listening.